Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Lee Cantor here with Roz Lewis, another episode of GWBC Radio. Roz, you have put together quite a crew today. But before we get too far into things, let's recap a little bit for the folks who weren't at the POP event.
What an exciting event.
Right?
Right? And more importantly, for the first time, we were broadcasting live.
That's right.
From this event with Business Radio X. So it was so much fun. I know you all were exhausted because you had,
day for us.
18 interviews
right.
with our women businesses and corporate members and attendees that were attending there. We have heard great things about, one, people love being on the radio.
We've established that. But more importantly, the impact that that event had for all the members, we were just overwhelmed by the amount of folks that came through our studio there, our kind of mobile studio, and told us how important GWBC was to them and their business and the impact it's made for them, for their community. It was really inspiring event.
Yeah, I think, always what we try to do is engage our women businesses, giving them opportunity to meet with other corporate members and also support other women businesses as well. And while they're in that networking environment, that they also walk away with a couple of nuggets of information that's going to help them grow their business. So we had several workshops as we did our radio show, the previous radio show on cash flow. Well, we had that as well, along with wealth. How to grow your business through entrepreneurship, or how to grow wealth through entrepreneurship, were some of the workshops that we had, and that keynote speaker.
She rocked it. I love that. And I've seen a lot of keynote speakers in my time. She was fantastic.
Yes. Well, you always try to get people engaged, especially after lunch, right?
Right.
So people don't go to sleep. But she was active, engaging. So if you thought you were coming to an event where you were going to be just a audience participant, no, she got you engaged into understanding how do you receive the apology, get the apology you never received, right? Or accept the apology that you never received. So
yeah, it was a great life lesson.
Yes.
And today's show will be no different. There'll be a lot of education and inspiration happening here today. Who'd you bring with you?
This morning we brought Kathleen Marren, who's Vice President, Diverse Customer Segments at UPS, and Debra Wilson. She's the Director of Marketing Diverse Customer Segments for UPS. And we're going to be talking a little bit about exporting, right? About the export business, because we do have an event coming up on the 18th of October, women in exporting. And what better company to give us information about that than UPS?
Yeah, they might know a thing or two.
Just a thing or two.
So who wants to kick it off? Do you want to talk about your roles at Diverse Customer Segment?
Sure. Good morning, everybody.
Kat?
This is Kathleen Marren from UPS. Roz, it's great to see you again this morning. Roz and I also share responsibility. I'm on the board of the GWBC, so I get two hats today, which is fun. So I kind of feel like an entrepreneur too, who has to wear multiple hats. I've got multiple on today. But my normal day job is one that supports women-owned businesses and diverse-owned businesses across the globe. And our objective is to find the solutions that make the most sense to help those businesses grow faster. And as they grow faster, the economics get better for the communities, which means, again, in a for-profit world, which is what I think many of us are looking to improve upon, we actually see, an uplift in employees. We see an uplift in brand management. We see an uplift in growth for everybody. So we're really excited about this segment that we own and that we learn from every single day by being on conference calls, by being in conferences, by talking to people like Roz and all the other weebies that we have out there. It's an exciting, dynamic space of innovation, and I'm very happy to have this role.
Now, how did you get involved with the GWBC?
It's a long-standing relationship that UPS has had, actually, with the GWBC and Roz in particular. I'm not sure I've got all the years, but I think 20 plus, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow.
We were one of the
20 years.
We were one of the founding companies to help GWBC kind of start its mission. We did that through our supplier diversity program in particular. So how do we as a good standing corporate partner find innovation and business opportunities that exist out there in diverse owned and women owned businesses that can be our suppliers? So they help us to be successful every single day. And we believe that we help them be successful. And that happened through GWBC to a large extent.
Yes. And I want to thank UPS for taking that opportunity to support our organization and its growth. So it was wonderful. It's been a great relationship and experience, and they're still here.
Still
with
here
us.
20 years later.
And we still put people on these radio programs to support.
They keep showing up.
Yes.
So now, when you look at the business opportunities globally, how do you even kind of wrap your arms around that? That seems so large.
It is huge. Again, as UPS is pretty large, we do service 220 countries around the world. We do have solutions that fit any market that's needed. But in recent years, there has certainly been an uptick in what societies, what cultures, and what governments to some extent want to do to help diverse communities strengthen their ability to grow and to create more business opportunities and therefore stabilize the market. So when we look at it globally, there is a very vast difference on what diversity means around the globe.
Like culturally in the different countries?
Exactly. So we don't want to be presumptive in that. We don't dictate what that is. We work within what's defined by the communities and what the governments have started to support. And we try to align with that to offer things that cultivate what the cultures and what the governments are kind of putting out. Which means for the most part, right now, the best place to do that is women-owned businesses globally. They are on the rise in tremendous numbers. And so we have launched many programs outside of the U.S. as well as inside the U.S. to support women exporters in particular. Because we firmly believe that if you can extend an opportunity to grow your business outside of your own community, you actually can grow far faster. We've seen stats that show that. So, we focus on women outside of the U.S. to a large extent. In the U.S., we have a much larger diverse program as well on top of what we do for women-owned businesses.
Align with some of the other corporations too, like Coca-Cola, has a 5x20 initiative program, meaning 5 million women businesses by the year 2020. And so they're pretty much on track to achieving that. But it's a great marketing I think initiative as well of how you increase your market. And so, the question I have is UPS working, with some of those customers, corporate customers as well, to kind of build that, and align with it? Because I always say it's good to partner at times in order to create that community of growth for women businesses.
So you're talking about, does UPS align with other large enterprises? So we do. A few big ones that I'll move to both corporate and government, but let's start with, again, we have strong relationships with USAID. We signed a pretty large agreement with the U.S. government earlier in this year to help fund a lot of infrastructure changes in global markets to help women businesses in particular. We do that through an organization called She Trades as well, which is part of the UN and how it reaches out to developing markets. In broader sense, from a corporation perspective, we are closely aligned with organizations such as We Connect as well. So We Connect helps women-owned businesses in particular to find alternatives, to find support outside of the U.S. So whether it's the legal needs when you expand and export, or you're trying to build infrastructure, to resources and labor, to marketing support in different languages that you might need if you're starting to explore in different countries. So we have connected with both the facilitators, with the government regulators, if you will, and we advocate on behalf of those things. We also are connected with other large companies like Delta, like BP, and some others that are doing supplier diversity efforts outside of the U.S. So we can all learn from each other in a way that brings up all organizations in these spaces.
Now, when you're working with the other large corporates, is it open where you're like, what are you doing here with diversity? Are there some best practices that maybe we're not aware of, or we're doing this works? Are they open to those kind of conversations?
Everybody, it seems, my experience in this diversity and inclusion space is everybody seems to be very open to share what's working and what's not working. I won't say we have a formal coalition of any kind, but we have an informal one with fellow board members from GWBC and other groups that my team circles in. I feel total confidence. If I picked up the phone and said, hey, what is your company doing in this space and how is it working, or what are the challenges internal, sometimes through bureaucracies at big companies, and then externally, how do you do that? Nobody has refused that call, and everybody has been very open. Debra, have you felt the same way when you've connected?
Oh, absolutely. We're in really good company, and there's a lot of collaboration and partnership, among the large corporations, but also in our work that we're doing with the small and medium businesses too. There's a partnership and a willingness to learn from one another, which I think is really exciting.
Now, do you think that collaboration is what is kind of allowing this acceleration of more and more female businesses to grow as rapidly? You think that's kind of adding fuel to this fire and it's kind of expanding?
There is certainly, again, whether when you do the psychological studies of what motivates women, you'll find that a lot of it does kind of come back to collaboration and teamwork and a nurturing of each other and at least a general philosophy of, rising tide rises all boats kind of philosophy. And so I think that is starting the momentum. I think it doesn't preclude men from this conversation at all, because quite candidly, more men who hear the voices and bring their own to this equation too creates that tide as well. So I won't say it's absolutely exclusive, but I think what I'm starting to see is just the willingness to talk more openly about what drives us, what motivates us, what challenges us. And there's more organizations out there than ever that are stepping in to kind of help feed gaps when we've identified them.
Now, when you are talking to the small business owner let's just say in America, since we're in America right now, is like exporting, is that even on their radar a lot of times? Is this something that, maybe do you see it every day and you're like, everybody should be exporting. This is obvious to us. Like, come on, what are they thinking? But to the person that's in a market, they're just out there battling in their own market. They can't even see going outside their state sometimes, let alone internationally.
It can be daunting, right? I mean, thinking about shipping your products outside of the U.S. can be very complicated.
Right. I forget about your product. What about the money coming back to me? Like, that's a whole other kind of can of worms.
Well, so the commerce, right?
Right.
The e-commerce of it.
Right.
Absolutely. When you look at it, I mean, part of the compelling, I think, point about revenue generation for even the smaller businesses is 95% of the world's population exists outside of the U.S.
Right.
95% of it. So as good
That's important perspective that I think we should all regain from time to time.
So as well as you might be doing in this market, there's obvious potential outside of the U.S. to take advantage of. And the other piece of it is with e-commerce and with just general globalization and information that's so free flowing, more and more companies, more and more people can find products any place in the world. That wasn't necessarily true 20 years ago. So if you only think about staying in your one physical market, you are limiting yourself, and your customers are telling you this. We've got many tools. We've got many websites that we help our customers to even just show them how many times they get pinged from somebody else in another country who's curious about their product. How do you actually then take advantage of that and fulfill that? They're not as complicated as it has to be, but just the first recognition, the awareness is where we start. There's plenty of wonderful things to do outside of the U.S. and many people want to buy your stuff. So,
right, and
everybody should be exporting them, Lee. That's
the bottom line.
But where do they start, right?
Yeah.
So where does a small business start? As far as that expanding, how far, should they, extend, and what countries, if you think about it, that you consider, I would say, safe harbors.
Right. Some baby steps.
Baby steps, absolutely. Yeah. So the first most important thing is to understand your product, right? There's a lot that goes into where you can sell your product, how you can ship your product. Fortunately, as complex as all of this is, there are a lot of really great tools and resources to help businesses learn about what it takes, right? You need to think about where you're going to export to. Some people, might be, very adventurous and want to go to all of the countries that they can go to as they expand all of a sudden. Sometimes it's good to stay in your comfort zone initially, right? Find some countries where we have free trade agreements. You've got 20 countries to choose from. Work with countries where someone in your business can conduct business fluently in the language, and someplace where you have some idea about business customs and just customs in general. These are some of the things to help you get started.
I think it's also, as indicated, there's some really good web analytic tools out there as well. Simple Web, I think, is just one. That's not, it's one of many, but they will quickly, for your website, just tell you, again, what's happening outside of what you think's happening. And if you see that there is an uplift in a country that you hadn't thought about before, then that's your starting point too, is to see just who's naturally, organically coming your way in the first place. Debra indicated obviously some proactive things that you can look at, but there's also the reactive side too. More people are connecting and seeing what you are putting out there than you may realize.
Wow. Well, given that, so you're talking about the product, know your product, but do I have to adapt my product, in order for shipping or to go overseas?
Right, like even translation,
right.
Language.
There's lots of alternatives to think through. I actually put a small plug in here for the U.S. Commercial Services Group, which is a government agency that sole purpose is to help U.S. businesses figure out what and where they should sell outside of the U.S. So they are here to help you grow your business through opening up new markets. They have tons of information both on products that are viable in other markets, things that people want to buy and businesses that need those products that U.S. companies make, but they also will tell you the restrictions on them. So they'll help you figure out what the compliance is in those countries. We have tools as well that can help you figure out some of that, as well as the taxes and the duties and things that will be applicable. And there's lots of other consulting organizations. Again, We Connect is another who's right there to help figure out as you step into this, whether you put your little toe in there or whether you're ready to actually build out facilities. There's a whole myriad of steps that can happen in between. And I think, Roz, that it might seem overwhelming at first, but know that there's plenty of organizations who will come and help you figure out how to get through some of those.
Well, that's always good to know, that you have access, to those resources. I guess, they just go to the website and look, that up. So can you just repeat the name of that organization again, so that we can, the listening audience will be able to hopefully tap into that resource. And then there's the Department of Economic Development. That's also the Department of Commerce, that also, because they do trade missions, and keep in mind, businesses, you can always go on trips with them, to these countries that give
often funded by the government.
Right.
So it's not out of your revenue pocket.
Right. So the organization that we partner with most frequently is the U.S. Commercial Service when we're working with small businesses here in Atlanta. They have a fantastic local office here. But the website that they've put together with unlimited educational materials and tools, one of my favorite tools is a market diversification tool where you can go in and look at your products that you're shipping, and it will help you to identify some of the countries where it would be viable for you to expand to. But that website is export.gov, and a lot of really fantastic resources for all sizes of businesses.
Can you share a story maybe of a small firm here in town or somebody that you personally dealt with or heard about that has, dipped their toe in and then had some level of success?
Wow.
You don't have to name names, but just like, they were an apparel company and they did this and they had never done that.
There's many, again, that go the exporting side. Some of them had to start first with thinking about just the basic nature of fulfillment. So I've got an example of it's a New York based company who creates flip-flops.
Okay.
And they were challenged with thinking
not high tech. This is
not high tech. Yeah. So it doesn't always always have to. They're cool flip-flops.
Right. They're really nice.
They're really nice flip-flops. But it doesn't have to be overly. And they're sustainable as well as actually they're good stewards of the community as well. So we were proud to work with them and solve not only how they wanted to fulfill here, because they were starting to get orders that were coming in fast and furious, and they had, almost moved from the quintessential in their garage and they were ready to start expanding. So we helped them to figure out how they were going to fulfill in general and how they were going to get to more marketplaces to do that. So some of our products, something we call UPS e-fulfillment gets you 21 marketplaces in one fell swoop, and it allowed them to boost their sales. Well, when the sales boosted, then they had to fulfill, and they didn't want to have to put capital up. And so they didn't want to have to find warehouses around the country. Again, this is what our e-fulfillment does. It allows, if they're ready, to have the UPS environment, store it in the warehouses across our country and pick and pack it, and get faster time in transit, and lets the flip-flop company focus on flip-flops as opposed to supply chain. Leave the supply chain to some degree to those of us who can work it better in different ways. So as they were continuing to grow in the U.S., they caught the eye of international people as well who want these lovely flip-flops. And so then they had that added challenge of where do we go next? How do we do that? So we have, again, information tools. We have contacts through the U.S. Commercial Services Group, and we connect, and we put them in contact with how to find those right markets and for them to grow faster by getting into them. And then we help them fulfill it. So they didn't have to put the capital into the countries they wanted to fulfill. I believe they started first they started, I think, in a few Asian markets. I think the Chinese were actually looking at which is not necessarily always the norm. Sometimes you start in language.
Mm-hmm. In language means like you're selling to people that speak the same language.
Yeah, if your website is in English, oftentimes you'll find it easier for other people around the country, around the globe to find you first in English. So you see an uptick, obviously, Canadian buyers in UK and Australia, et cetera. But that doesn't preclude the rest of the world who clearly also studies English and can figure out a website, what a flip-flop looks like. So they were getting pinged by other countries a lot.
And that's where the analytics, where you can start saying, wow, there's a lot of people in Japan that seems to be at least going to our website.
Correct. So how do we want to do that?
Right.
How on earth do I then do this? So with some tools that we've got that allowed them to figure out how to predict what was going to be the duty and tax so that their consumer would have the information up front. We helped them to revise their website. So although it may not have been in every language around the globe, it at least took into account the internationalization of the duty and tax, of the exchange rates, et cetera, so that it made it so much easier for them to communicate what they needed to their buyers. So they've seen an uptick, obviously, in their international growth. They're very happy with both their business and quite honestly, they're happy with the relationship they have with us. So just one example for sure.
But that's where UPS is really partnering with them. Like they didn't have to hire a supply chain guru. They just called UPS and a human being helped kind of work. A human
being can help. You can, if you're not ready for the human being and the intensity that we bring sometimes. We actually have on UPS.com, there's a knowledge center that we have as well. And if you're a small business or in whatever industry, there's both articles and things that we put out that help give better guidance on what, fulfillment means, what it doesn't mean, what marketplaces are, what they aren't, how they help you, how you need to watch. And then at the same time, there's places where you can say, and I need help. So if you put your information in, then we can set up either a free 15-minute consultation with somebody who can help you with whatever is your solution you're looking for.
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Correct.
Like
just
this
come
is
ask the questions.
Right.
But it also saves them if you think about it.
Right.
They're not paying, they're not having to worry about, funding a warehouse, there's on an as-needed basis. So to me, it's a great, just-in-time system throughout the supply chain and more cost-effective to sell those bejeweled flip-flops.
Sustainable flip-flops.
Flip-flops.
And it's kind of an honest broker. It's not somebody with an agenda that is, there's a lot of people that are, not, I wouldn't say disreputable. There's people out there that may not have the best interest of this, mom and pop flip-flop company at heart. And that with UPS, you're getting somebody that's a trusted
brand, we hope. I think that that's a valid point. So I guess our best suggestion is go find organizations that legitimately are looking to help you. Now, certainly we do believe that we are the best in the business when it comes to logistics and supply chain solutions, but we know that there are other partners out there. So we bring in other solutions that may not have been readily available to you. So we have partners that help our customers create revenue. Although I am a marketer, this is not my company's core. We don't sell marketing products. We sell transportation logistics. But guess what? We have contacts because we can leverage our assets, if you will, to bring in other partners. So whether it's, the Netelixirs of the world or search engine optimization companies, we have mechanisms by which we provide those to our customers so that they have another third party they can trust to go to develop what they need to develop. So if it's not what you want from UPS directly in terms of moving package from A to B or putting it on a boat, coming in from China as your source, we still have other things that you can leverage from us, is the point.
If we've done our job well, we walk away from some of these conversations with businesses saying, hey, I didn't know UPS could help me figure that out.
Right, but from a marketing standpoint, that must be frustrating because you want them to know all the stuff that you offer. Right, it's a double-edged sword.
Some days.
Right.
But, and I don't want to wax, philosophical, but I think as I started the conversation and Debra and I, take this to heart, there is something very compelling and something very rewarding about finding a way to have, any business be able to find greater strength and growth. Would I love them to be a diehard UPS user? Absolutely. But you know what? At the same time, if I've found a way to make them happy, they'll eventually come back and have a conversation with us, or they'll advocate for us in another way, indirectly. And I can live with that because I think that that's a positive way for us to look at diversity and inclusion as well.
Well, and it's also a way of paying it forward, right? And so it always comes back or circles back to you. And women are loyal. They're loyal to those corporations and companies that support them. So I think, having this information. So what my takeaway from this just now is basically, UPS is also in the business of growing other businesses, right? And marketing that as well, of saying, we are looking at you in totality, not just as a shipping customer.
Right. Our partnerships are with, companies as suppliers to UPS, as customers of UPS. I mean, at some point, even if you're not doing business with us right now, we hire a lot of people as well. And so having those business relationships and helping grow the businesses that are strengthening the communities that we're in provides us, better access to really qualified employees who can help us continue to do the work that we do.
It's mutually beneficial to see, again, economic uplift by small and medium businesses. So even the big companies out there, I think more and more frequently are recognizing this, and doing something about it. So we're not just talking about it anymore. I think we're actually putting practical solutions out there in a more direct and more intentional way than we have in the past.
Now, are you seeing more and more companies kind of take the leap into exporting? Like, is that a trend that you're seeing more and more of, or is it flat? Like, where is it right now?
The export market is on the rise in general, and I say that over probably a 5 or 7 year period. With that said, the last year and a half has been a little bit of a challenge, to say the least.
What do you think could have contributed to that?
There's a lot of conversations, obviously, about the globalization and trade and certainly policies. So the short answer is, I think we're seeing a little bit of a dip in because there's some concerns about what that really looks like. And not telling everybody on the radio what they, already know, but when you're trying to make your margins hold true and as tight as you can, and all of a sudden you have a supplier who's got to pay a very different tax scenario than they used to because the policies have changed in whatever direction by whatever country, it's a major impact to you. So companies like us are at least aware of that. So we are starting to see more conversations about how do I export to the right markets? So again, some of the support we give is, although this might be a lucrative market, maybe this is not the time perhaps to find another one. And the inbound is just as important to look at. So as more and more companies, regardless of size, are sourcing outside of the U.S. because it's smart to do, it's economically viable to do, some of that is closing a little bit and tightening. And a company who's thinking about it is always trying to be flexible about where they can find those suppliers too. So some of the things that the U.S. Commercial Services does as well, and we help where we can, is if your supplier base outside of the U.S. is kind of dried up for cost reasons, where else can you go? Where is another viable supplier to you, maybe in another market that's not currently having the same policy change or tax scenario? And having that flexibility to figure out how to do that is really critical to keep a company alive.
And the uncertainty is what small business, they don't like uncertainty. Everybody wants as much, kind of understanding the lay of the land as possible. And when it's turbulent, it just makes it difficult.
Indeed. I think all businesses face that, whether it's in fuel prices that we're seeing these days. I mean, when you fly a fleet that's, as big as ours, 13th largest in the globe. Yeah. You don't like the uncertainty. You pay attention to all kinds of uncertainty. So it's not missed on companies like ours that when you put it down into the micro levels too, that it's highly impactful for continuity.
Right. And people don't realize kind of when one domino falls, kind of the ramifications of that, 4 dominoes away from that.
Absolutely right. It's trying to predict and plan for that too. We often talk about, if you don't plan and you don't forecast and you don't measure it, then obviously you're not going to move the mark where you need to. But in a time of uncertainty, it really gets even more complicated to forecast. So having abilities to see what is going on in your business is also important. So if I can take this just along that path for a second, we are big at UPS about data, and we are big about dashboards. We talk about them all the time. I'm sure many of you guys out there have thought about your business dashboards too. And it all comes down to the data that you have that drives that, so that you can, as close to real time, see the impacts that are happening to you, and therefore be able to pivot and move as quickly as you can. And in the supply chain, that's really critical, especially when we come to trade and we come to, fuel prices and everything else. It's how do you know what's about to hit you as a small business? If you can see that even a day or two in advance, you can adjust for it. Mm-hmm. You can't fix the past. So dashboards and tools that are available to you, you should seek out. And again, where we can help, we're happy to try and build those with you.
Now, a company that's thinking about exporting, is that something that if they partner with UPS, they have access to some of those tools for themselves, so they don't have to go and invest and create these kind of tools for themselves in their export business?
Absolutely. And what we've just launched in the last few months, after a lot of years of learning with our consumers, we have something that we call My Choice for consumers, is where it started, and it was giving them visibility. Hopefully many people have used that. But we've now advanced that into the B2B world. So it's My Choice for Business. And it allows you to see real time what's coming into you, how that's coming in. It helps you to figure out your inventories and maybe your finances relative to your ordering process. And then it figures out with you your outbound, and where that's going to play. And if we close this whole circle on e-commerce, most companies have to have a solution of returns of some kind. And if you have that ability, you can see what's coming your way and going out, and the whole full circle. That's an easy downloadable program by UPS. It's a simple registration, My Choice for Business. See if it works for you. It's ready and available.
Well, I really don't think, I'm a proponent of not reinventing the wheel. And when you have resources such as UPS, and granted, the listening audience, yes, you have other options out there, but why not make sure you're focusing on what's core to your business and leave that type of information to the experts who do this day in and day out, and partner with them on that? And how do we encourage more small businesses to utilize these products and services?
Right. That's what we like to say, right? Let us be the trade compliance and customs experts, so you don't have to be. You're running your business every day. You're doing business development. You're training your people. You're hiring your people. You're looking for suppliers. Let us, solve those complicated problems for you. One of the ways that we're helping small businesses to explore their export opportunities, and if they're already doing it, get better at it, get more efficient at it, is through a series of workshops. I don't know if you want to talk about the one that we have coming up soon. You mentioned it just a bit earlier in the beginning. But we're putting together a growth workshop for small businesses, and this is one of the workshops that we've done in several parts of the country. But we're particularly fond of our Atlanta area partners in the GWBC. So we have the honor of hosting this group at our beautiful corporate offices. So it'll be a lot of fun. It's Friday, October 18th. It's 9:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. And this is intended to be a growth workshop for those businesses who have a product that they're interested in exporting. And so the agenda is broader than exporting. It's going to include facilitated sessions with our subject matter experts on knowing your customer, finding the right marketplace partner, understanding your supply chain, and also gaining access to capital. So in addition to getting to spend some time with our subject matter experts and to ask your questions and to network with one another, I think you'll also find that you'll get to spend the day with a whole lot of really great people.
Now, are these first-time exporters? Are they veteran? Like, who's invited? You can be what we call the accidental exporter, right? You got an order on your website, and all of a sudden you're trying to figure out how to ship to Mexico. Does that happen? That must happen all the time.
Oh, it happens all the time. Mm-hmm. It happens all the time.
So what do they do? Because that's the thing
they call you, don't they?
They call UPS. They muddle through. If you get lucky, it's a good experience for you and your customer. More often than not, it's a little bumpy for you and your customer. And that's an area where we can help you get more intentional about preparing yourself to be able to do that, to accept orders, but also be more intentional about marketing.
Because that's in this online world, and you have a website and you sell something, and the internet is the world, so anybody can access it from anywhere. And then they go to your website and they're from another country and they're like, send me your widget. And you're like, huh? Like, where?
Now what do I do? Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of times we find that companies say no. They have to turn it down because they say no because they don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Wow. You have another set, to Debra's point, who will try, and maybe they don't know how to fill out the customs document properly, so the product gets stuck. Right. Or gets returned back to the U.S. And so not only did you spend a lot of money to get it there, your customer didn't even get it. Right. And then they're mad and they've gone someplace else. So what Debra's trying to describe too is this is an opportunity for those to take that surprise moment out of the small, medium business, so that when they see that order from Mexico, they're like, yes, now we know what to do. And even if it's not an intentional marketing campaign for them, at least they can respond in a way that still keeps their revenue and their profit moving. But we are glad to support anybody who's, moving up from that phase too, and is wanting to be more intentional about this and find more markets and actually create growth strategies around it.
Right. So you're not the accidental exporter.
Correct. Exactly. Accidents happen, but you try the next time
to plan for it.
To keep them from being detrimental.
Isn't it ironic though? They have a website. I guess they don't think like this is the world. Like they think their website is just for them or the people around them, but it's the world. Every time you put something out there, the world can find it. And then, so it's just surprising that if they would do some sort of an online marketplace, they would think like, oh, no one's going to order it from outside of the country. Like it wouldn't, so they would be surprised, but I guess that happens.
It does happen.
And some companies will, be intentional in saying on their site, we can't ship outside of the U.S. because they haven't figured out how to do it. Maybe they haven't figured out how to do it cost effectively, or how to ship their products to protect them, or how to get them there in a timely manner. And these are all things that we can help businesses who are just starting to think about this do, and people who are already doing it do it better and more efficiently.
Right, because that's a clue. Like if somebody from outside the country wants your stuff, it's hard to get customers. So it's,
it's hard to get.
So if you get a customer outside, it's like, hey, there might be other ones out there too.
Well, and especially, I talk a lot about this when I meet with women-owned businesses and other diverse, actually all small businesses, quite candidly, is where do I find more companies or customers who want to buy my things? And how do I compete with the big guys out there who are, dominating in lots of ways because they can? How do I compete with that? Well, one of those pieces, as we would argue, is don't miss out on a market that's untapped for you first and foremost. So, it may not be in your backyard anymore. It may be someplace overseas.
Right.
Well, we just said, 95% of the population is outside of the U.S., not inside the U.S. So it would almost behoove small businesses to really seriously consider and think about, especially with online capabilities, of how do you target that customer outside of the U.S.
And customers outside of the U.S. want to buy products from U.S. companies. We're known for the quality of our products. Mm-hmm. We're known for the uniqueness of our products, but we're also known for creating products that are going to be healthy and safe and sustainably produced. And that's very appealing to consumers outside the U.S. and businesses outside the U.S.
Now, especially a growing millennial market outside the U.S. too, because that 95% includes an awful lot of younger people who, to Debra's point, have differing views on what's the value proposition of a product these days. And it may be more than the actual product itself. It may be all the other pieces surrounding it. So there's markets to be exploited.
Now, Roz, we kind of promoted this episode throughout social media, and we have somebody from the audience, I think, that has asked a question because they knew that some gurus of exporting were going to be in the room here today.
Yes, we do. And this is coming off of Facebook. And this is one of the questions from Julie Weldon. And that is, what are some of the pitfalls to be aware of in exporting? And it's actually a two-part question. And what are some of the tactical steps or tools, resources a business owner can use when considering exporting?
I know a really great workshop you can come to.
Well, she's outside. We got the pleasure to interview her at the POP event, and she's outside of Georgia, but she should come because it's open to everybody.
It's just a short jaunt from North Carolina. We're gladly welcome we're gladly have them come into. This is not exclusive.
Peer pressure for her.
But in answer to her broader question, I'm sorry, Debra, in answer to her broader question, some of the pitfalls, I think we've covered a few of them, but just to kind of reemphasize a few of them. Number one, knowing whether or not your product is legally viable for another country is, I think, one of the key points first. And again, using sources like the U.S. Commercial Services to confirm that. We find that sometimes, with all the goodness that happens online, people stumble into some things that cause them longer term challenges when they send something they shouldn't be. And then the other pitfall is once you know that you can do it, it's how do you do it? And there's smarter ways to do it because you can avoid duty and taxes. You do not want to do that. None of us want to see that happen because it's a bad customer experience across the board. The product doesn't get where it's supposed to be. You get charged more. There's fees that can be involved, et cetera. So learning about these things up front is the smartest thing that you can do to mitigate all of those risks as you think about exporting, because the pitfalls, on a tactical level can happen really quickly. Long-term strategies about, actually figuring out how far you want to grow and how you want to create new sales opportunities and warehousing and things like that are much larger conversations. But again, there's resources like We Connect who can take companies who are ready to go do those things as well.
And this is one of those things where these are some unknowns for this, these people that have never done it before. And it sounds like it's a lot or it's hard or there's penalty, like there could be fear around it. But once you have some trusted partners and you kind of get your systems down, then it's just normal business. There's a learning curve, but once you get through it, the payoff could be huge.
It should be huge. And again, you're right. Like anything, you've got to dabble and learn a little bit and maybe revert and fix and then go forward. But with the right solutions, with the right support, you can certainly get through any of that pain. Most companies who are growing faster, and in fact, we show that women businesses who are exporting they produce higher than women businesses who don't. Okay. They hire more people than women businesses who don't because they're growing faster. They provide higher wages for their employees when they do this. So there's again a halo effect of forcing yourself to learn what you need to learn because it hopefully suits not only your growth objectives, but it also supports maybe your principles of what you want to be as an economic stimulator too.
Right. And the payoff is so high that the risk reward is so in the favor of reward for taking the leap, I think. Just go for it.
Go for it. You don't have to go by yourself.
Right.
Come with us. We'll be okay. Or go with somebody. Again, there's other support factors out there that will take this from being something daunting to something that is sometimes really fun.
Right.
You get to open up a new communication with people around the globe.
Around the world, right.
And they give you new insights as to, what they want to see from you. And I got to imagine that with the creative people that we've got on the phone and who want to do new things and innovation, it isn't just limited to the U.S. market by any stretch.
Well, you would almost, the question is too, how much education will you need to have about these other countries and knowing what's happening in there? Because there's so many things that can impact, your business when it comes to exporting. And I know we've been talking about exporting, but even importing, so, Debra, what happens or what is it that I need to know as a business owner, or how far, or can I just rely, on my transportation partner?
You need to do your research, right? So this is not an area where you want to fly by the seat of your pants, right? You want to plan in order to be successful. When I've worked with small businesses who are kind of looking at taking the first steps, I always recommend going to export.gov. They have some really fantastic tools that I mentioned before. One of the tools that I really like is it's called the market diversification tool that I mentioned earlier. That's your starting point for thinking about, okay, I'm going to look at Canada, Mexico, and Australia. Well, then you can find market guides specific to each of those countries that then will help you dig into what the rules and regulations are and what the barriers might be and what the considerations would be for your product. And then it just helps you create that very intentional pathway and strategy to say, this is what I'm going to do next and how I'm going to go about doing it. And it helps you avoid some of those pitfalls.
And then no matter what the person is selling, there's going to be different kind of challenges associated, right? Like, so an apparel company might have a different challenge than a manufacturing company that might have a different challenge than a high-tech company, right? Like, there's different rules and different kind of pitfalls that each one of those provide. But when you go to those kind of governmental resources or UPS, you can kind of help them stay within the lanes of whatever it is.
Correct. Whatever compliance is necessary.
Because they're all different, right?
They can be very different. I think with the amount of emphasis that we've placed over the years on learning more about the total industries and what's happening in there, we monitor the trends, whether it's healthcare or high tech and the subsegments below them. What is actually going to be an advantage for companies as they trade, and what's going to be the disadvantages or what's going to be the challenges and the changes. And to the degree that we bring those forward to our customers, we're doing a better and better job of forecasting them ourselves so that we can be that consultant, if you want to think about that, to our own customers to say, watch out for this. This is coming your way. So even if you started down a path and you feel really comfortable, things change, right?
Right.
So watching the politics, watching the physical side. I mean, for goodness sakes, even watching weather, you wouldn't maybe believe it. And if anybody ever comes to Louisville to visit us at UPS, we'll show you our huge meteorological society that we have in there. Because you got to imagine when you're moving, aircraft and
you got to know
vehicles,
where the hurricane
you got to know
is,
where the hurricanes are coming and how you continue to do it. And maybe some of you in different places have even seen our package cars and the flights still moving when others aren't. And that's because we know how to work the network. Well, same thing happens in small businesses. Predictability, figuring out what you can identify ahead of time is far smarter. So you have consultants, you have advisors through UPS who help to do that by industry, by geo, and by product to some degree.
Now, Roz, having relationships with UPS and these other corporate partners that you have really gives the small to mid-sized business owner, the members of GWBC, kind of a leg up. It's almost, kind of a secret weapons to help them grow.
It is. And, more importantly, even though you're small, and these are for, I would say, the women businesses who are certified through our organization, and I'm going to put in a plug, we offer a discount on the shipping that is available. So you may not be that large corporate customer for UPS, but it still doesn't mean you can't take advantage and utilize how you increase your gross margin, right, on your products or services that you're shipping. And so we encourage, you to do that. And that's one of the reasons, when we were talking about this subject and knowing that this was coming up, that we wanted to expand this opportunity for people to get more insight as to what all that UPS does. And granted, they market themselves as logistics, but what does that mean? Because that's so broad, right?
Because if you're a flip-flop company, like what does, how does that pertain, But then you realize it pertains in lots of ways that you may not even guess could occur. And then once you have conversations, then all of a sudden that leads to more and more opportunity.
Right. But, if you think about it, we're always shipping.
Right.
Whether it's for business
coming to you or going away from you.
For personal, right. We're always moving a product somewhere, and of course the holidays are coming up. And so that is just going to be overload. I love it when they give this the last day that you're going to be able to ship if you want it there on Christmas Day, right? Or any of those holidays, you got to realize that you do have to plan ahead in order to get that, and that's a supply chain effect as well. But I think more importantly, I've learned so much more on the inside of what they do, what they offer. And I think that to me is the broader message of all the tools and resources that you as a small business don't have to have, but it's it's a plethora of opportunities for you to gain that assistance in order to move that product outside of the U.S. to the over 95%
the rest of the world, right.
And to the rest of the world, So cement, yes, you're a customer here in the U.S., but also think about and plan of how you can gain additional customers.
Right. It's a big world out there, and think big, aim high, right?
It is. Well, also it says generative, right? If you think about it, Kat mentioned earlier, we talk about millennials and how they are cause driven and looking, to be more engaged, but their online buying is growing. Of course, that's a market. Well, guess what? It has to get to me, right? So it's not that I'm going in the store and picking up, but even then they got to ship the product. Mm-hmm. They got to even get it to the stores. So I just think that's an opportunity there as well for them to look at how do they utilize a company like UPS to help improve their shipping to their customers.
A really quick, short thing that can be done by anybody is take the time, take 10 or 15 minutes in your business and get a piece of paper in front of you as best as you can. Draw the globe, draw the U.S. where you want it to be and the other countries around the world, and just map out. We call it supply chain map. Just map out how your products are created, how they move, how your customers need to return them. And then overlay on top of the physical movement, think about the information that you need. So how do you think about the information from your suppliers to your customers and then back around? And then how, quite honestly, does the money move? If you think about just those three things in your supply chain, goods, funds, and information, and you draw it out on a piece of paper, you're going to find places where you've got weak spots. And as you do that, you can solve for them. And so that kind of mapping session you can do on your own, or again, we have people who can certainly help to do that, including Debra and myself.
And you can come do it at the workshop on October 18th.
That's right.
Final plug.
When is that workshop again?
That would be Friday, October 18th.
At UPS.
At UPS, yeah.
Headquarters.
And there'll be more information available about that and how to register on the GWBC website very shortly. So be looking out for that.
And that's one of those things where the opportunity is there. It's there for you to take if you want it. And there's information and people who want to help you, be successful. So, I mean, it's silly not to at least explore it at the minimum. And earlier you mentioned that the analytics on your website can give you some clues. Like if there's a lot of people from another country hitting your website, you may want to consider trying to sell them something, right?
Agreed.
So now, Roz, if somebody wanted to learn more about GWBC, some of the events like this, what's the coordinates?
Well, we always encourage you to visit our website at gwbc.biz. And more importantly, go to our calendar page, because on our calendar page, it's going to show you some of the events or programs that we will be hosting, such as the one that's on October 18th, right? The UPS on exporting. But if, whatever you have on your schedule, if you can move it, I would encourage you to change it and come to this event. We also have another event that's coming up on Monday. Cash is Queen. Once again, we want to talk about and really deep diving into those financials for you, because that is key. That is important. In other words, you got to have cash flow in order to be able to export those products or services, export those products. So that, and more importantly, along with, aside from your other homework that you just got from Kat, of looking at a global map and outlining that supply chain effect. And, you mentioned something else, tied to this cash is queen is currency. So that might be another segment that, right. Lee, we need to talk about is learn about the type of currency, because that also will impact your bottom line.
And then a shout out and thanks to Julie Walden for her question. And be on the lookout for the GWBC Facebook page, because as soon as we have the topics for next month, there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions of the guests so that you can get your question answered here on the show. Thank you all for sharing your story today.
Thank you very much, Lee, and Business Radio X for helping us out. Roz, always a pleasure.
And thank you, Roz. You have any words of wisdom for our crew out there?
I do. I always have my parting thoughts, right? And my parting thought for today is ignoring online marketing is like opening a business but not telling anyone. So keep that in mind. And that's anonymous, actually. So I can't even give
that's you.
Credit. So
you said it.
As Roz always says.
As Roz always says,
we quoted 1,500 times today.
So hopefully we've gotten someone really fired up today about wanting to figure out how they can export. So we've got the workshop available to you. I also want to give you our email address so that you can contact us if there's something that Kat and I can do for you to help you think about what is your next best step. Please reach out to us. It's diversitygrowth@ups.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to connect with you and help you figure out what that next step is.
And the website for UPS is it just UPS.com?
UPS.com, but go to the Knowledge Center in particular.
The Knowledge Center has a whole bunch of resources.
Agreed.
Good stuff. Thank you again for putting this together, Roz. GWBC Radio, so important to serving the community.
And thank you, Lee and Stone. We love the partnership.
All right. This is Lee Cantor for Stone Payton, Roz Lewis, and all our guests here today. We will see you all next time on GWBC Radio.